Awesome. Welcome, guys, and happy Earth Day. I'm here at the Science Center, and we're going to visit some of our native species in the animal room and these guys who are just outside. These are our brown trout. Before we get started, Peter's going to go over some suggestions for how to best use Zoom this morning. So I'm off screen, and I'm just going to talk to you all this morning while we visit with some of our animals in honor of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. I thought we would check out some of our animal neighbors that live in the Ithaca area. If you're joining us from outside of Ithaca, I encourage you to look up some of these animals and see if they can be found in your part of the world or if there are different species where you live. Right now, you guys are looking at our fingerling brown trout. And if anybody has gone through 4th grade in the Ithaca City School District, you have some experience with this type of fish. These fish are part of the Trout in the Classroom program, and the Science Center got them this fall when they were just eyed eggs. So they were still in egg form. They had a little black dot. We could see their eye through the clear egg. And they have developed from there. So from eyed eggs, they developed into embryos, and we started to see the little fish curled around in those eggs. And then when they hatched, they still had some yolk sacs stuck to their belly. And they weren't swimming around looking for food yet. They were living off the nourishment in that yolk sac. And at that point, they were called alevins. And now, from alevins, our brown trout have grown into fingerling fries. So they swim around. They have some really lovely markings you can see on them that help with camouflage as they swim and against the rocks. And they do eat food now out of the water, and they have for some time. I'm gonna drop some food in. They've seen me stand up. They're getting really excited. They've all moved to the top of the tank. So I'll tilt you guys up to see them a little bit better. There we go. I apologize for the glare. It's what happens when you have light and tanks and water. So I'm trickling some food in. And these guys are eating. Does anyone have any observations about these fish that they would like to share, these brown trout?
Arlo, do you want to unmute yourself? I see your hand is up.
Yes, Emily, I'm kind of noticing they're all kind of in like a big group, kind of like sardines in the wild ocean.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, Arlo. So we're noticing that these fingerling brown trout are all swimming together. They're schooling a little bit in our tank here because of the way we have our tank set up with the current, and they're all moving towards the food. So they are moving as a group. They're not quite as coordinated as sardines out in the ocean.
Awesome. Gray, I saw your hand is raised on participant, or the blue hand is up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I think you guys are muted again. Do you want to try asking a question one person at a time, or make your observation?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, you go first. So, why do they all like to go up?
So they all swam up towards the surface. Our fish here at the Science Center have gotten pretty good at recognizing when they're about to be fed. So when I grabbed some food and brought my hands up towards the surface of the tank, they moved up there to try to compete for some of those food pellets. You'll notice our fish are different sizes, and that depends on how well they're able to get to the food. There's a lot of other fish trying to eat the food in there. Oops.
Did you have another question, Gray? I know there's two of you there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So like,
What kind of food are you giving them, and why do they like it so much? Are they used to it, or are they just excited that they're getting food?
So they are pretty used to this food. They get trout pellets, which have various animal proteins and other vitamins and things in them. Out in the wild, trout eat a lot of insects, particularly aquatic insects and aquatic insect larvae that they can find in the water. They will also sometimes eat smaller fish, including younger trout. They will eat any insects that fall into the stream or lake. Typically, you'll find adult trout in the lake, but when they spawn, when they lay their eggs, the fish swim upstream into the rivers, and they create nests in the bottom in the riverbed. Those are called redds, and that's where the female trout lay their eggs.
Cool. Good observations. We have a couple more from some different folks. Vivian, your hand is up. Do you want to make an observation or ask a question? You'll need to unmute yourself, Vivian. There you go.
I've noticed that some fish are faster than the others.
Yeah, some fish are moving a little bit faster than others right now. That's absolutely true. Maybe they're still looking for food. Maybe they're trying to get away from some of the bigger fish in there and find their own little patch of water to swim in. That's a good observation.
Jesse,
I'm going to point you guys towards the bottom so you can see the tank, and I think it will help you understand a little bit the coloring on these fish. But if somebody else has a question while I'm working on that.
Jesse, you had your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
What color are the trout when they're babies? Or what? What are they called again? I forgot.
You're right. So these are brown trout.
Yeah. What color are they? Brown?
Yeah, they're pretty brown. You can see now, I'm showing you the gravel, and you can see how they have those markings to help them sort of blend into the bottom. And you can imagine a stream bed might look pretty similar with lots of shades of brown and gray and white. When these guys first hatched, I would say they were a little bit darker in color, especially as they were hanging out towards the bottom again all the time. Now they have a little bit more light so that it helps them to blend in these lighter waters.
Gray, you have your hand up again. Do you have another observation or a question?
Yes.
Yes. What day do they get born?
What he said, what day were they born?
What's their birthday?
Oh, thanks for translating. That's a really good question. I'm not actually sure when our trout started to hatch. Typically, adult trout spawn in the fall, and then it takes some time for the eggs to mature. But I don't know their actual birthday. Sometime this fall. So it'll take them a couple of years to reach full-grown size. They have a lot of growing to do. You guys can keep asking questions, but I'm actually going to bring you over to see our adult brook trout, which we have over in our Cayuga Lake tank. I'm going to cover the camera on my screen right now so you don't get nauseous while I walk you over there, but feel free to keep talking.
Emily, Vivian had a question to me in the chat, which I thought was a great one, of how do the fish not get cold?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked that. One of the really interesting things about trout, and the reason they do so well here, is that they actually want cold water. So it's pretty important to keep our trout's water nice.
Oh, she muted herself. I think she was trying to say nice and cold.
Yep, nice and cold. Sorry. Seem to have also turned off my camera. Don't know how any of that happened, but here we are again. I'm going to turn off my camera while I keep us set up. But trout are particularly sensitive to water quality. So they like cold, very, very clean water, which can be sort of a challenge, right? We need to help conserve our waterways so that these trout can still have a home here. We are going to check out our adult brook trout now. Brook trout are the state fish of New York, and they also like those pretty cold waters. So if you think about the streams and lake, you know it gets pretty cold here. One just bit my finger. These guys are hungry too. So we'll give them some food. They're swimming up because they saw my finger hit the surface of the water, and they are expecting to eat. So this is a much larger tank, and these are much larger fish. They weren't quite adults when we got them, but they have grown a lot. I just gave them some fish flakes because we do have some other smaller fish in here called darters. We used to have more smaller fish in here, but the trout ate them pretty quick.
I saw, Liam, your hand has been up for a little bit. Do you have a question or an observation?
Yes. How do them survive inside cold water?
Can you say that one more time? I couldn't quite hear you.
How do them survive inside cold water?
How do they survive the cold water? Was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you catch that, Emily?
Yeah, I don't actually know exactly what their metabolism is that allows them to do that, but cold water often has more oxygen in it than very warm water. That's correct, right, Peter?
Yes, it can hold, when water is really cold, it has the ability to hold more oxygen in the water, which makes it easier for them to breathe.
And fish also need to breathe. So it's really important for these fish in particular to have cold, oxygenated water. And their bodies are just set up to live in that temperature so that they can get all of that oxygen and clean nutrients, all that good stuff.
We have a couple more hands up. Gray, I saw your hand was raised. Do you want to make an observation or ask a question again?
Yeah, so why can't they swim when it's hot?
Why can't they swim when it's hot? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they might still be able to swim, but they wouldn't like it. Their bodies aren't set up for warmer water, so they wouldn't survive very long. They can live in a range because, as we know, the temperature of the water changes seasonally, especially somewhere like New York State. But it doesn't leave sort of a 10 to 20 degree range. So we don't get, it's not like our lake ever boils or gets above 65 degrees, 70 degrees, I don't know.
We have a whole bunch of questions now, so I'll go down the list real fast. Rylan, do you have a comment or a question?
What did he eat?
Good question.
Yeah, so like we talked about, I just gave them trout pellets, but out in the wild, they would enjoy lots of different insects, smaller fish, any small enough animals that fell into the water with them. A weird behavior I've noticed with them also is that sometimes they will pick up rocks from the stream bed and put those in their mouth. I think they're trying to clean any food off from around the rocks because they don't swallow the rocks, they spit them back out. But you might see some of them doing that now too. They'll eat crayfish, they'll eat different larvae of aquatic insects that you would find in our streams and lakes here. So they have a pretty varied diet. They're really good at eating because they want to get nice and big to outcompete all those other fish and predators.
Good question. Vivian, do you have a comment or a question you want to make?
What would happen if saltwater fish went in freshwater?
Good question. So again, they wouldn't be adapted. They wouldn't be set up to handle that environment. Saltwater fish need to live in a saltwater environment Whereas freshwater fish really don't do well if you introduce a ton of salt into their environment. There are some fish that can survive in sort of brackish water where freshwater streams meet the ocean and things like that, but they tend to be pretty well adapted to their habitat. Just like we can't survive underwater, these guys can't survive in air, they can't survive in different types of water, they probably couldn't live in orange juice or anything like that. Those all have really different compositions.
Good question. Jesse, your hand is up.
Are there still eggs in the tank in the baby brown trout?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because the eggs spawned in the fall and they were all laid at around the same time, they hatched at about the same time. So they've all been hatched out, those eggs that survived, and there are no remaining eggs in the tank.
Oh.
Good
Yeah.
question.
And we hope to release those we will release those baby brown trout into Cascadilla Creek in late spring or early summer this year.
Gray, your hand is up again. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. Can those fish can the fish eat? I actually have two questions. Can the fish eat? Can the fish eat? Can the fish eat different things? Like trout pellets or insects? Can they eat different things than that?
Yep, definitely. So they'll go after little crustaceans like crayfish. They'll eat other fish. They'll try to eat almost anything that falls into the stream, and they'll check that out.
And I have another question.
All right.
I have a question too.
Can they survive in the ocean, or can they only survive in lakes and creeks?
So they can only survive in fresh water, and they can't survive in waters above 70 degrees. So they would not survive in the ocean. And that's why it's really, really important for us to keep freshwater habitats clean for beautiful fish like these.
Oh my God, people looking at.
Yeah.
Do we have one more question from that group there?
No more questions from me.
Okay.
Sit up. No.
All right.
All right. I wanted to show you all one more collection that we have here. This is something that our trout would eat. Well, it's really two more. I'm going to show you, we have some worm bins here at the Science Center. And I thought we might pick some worms out of those today and then feed them to some of my favorite
Oh. Emily, it looks
native
your audio
creatures
is cutting
in
out a little
the
bit.
species room. Can you hear me now,
yes.
guys? Okay, awesome. So I am showing you one of our worm bins here at the Science Center. You can see we've got this really lovely, rich soil that the worms have created for us. I'm gonna dig through and try to find some of these worms. So we love earthworms. They're actually red wigglers, which aren't native to New York State, but you might find some different types of earthworms out in your garden or your yard. And they make really beautiful soil. So they eat lots of decaying material. We can see some evidence of different fruits and veggies that we've thrown in here, as well as newspaper that have all been eaten by our worms. And they've pooped out this lovely rich soil. Here's one of our red wiggler worms. I'm gonna grab a couple other ones so we can feed some of these out to our spotted Salamanders. That wasn't a worm, that was Io. Everybody say hey to Io. He's doing his work this morning, helping me with the animals. I'm gonna try to find one more worm. Here's one. All right, so I've got 3 little earthworms now. And we're gonna go up and take a look at our spotted salamander tank. I'm gonna turn my camera around so I can do a better job of showing you guys what's going on. Okay. These are our spotted salamanders. So spotted salamanders are also native to this area. You probably haven't seen them. They're quite large and they like to hide under logs like this guy's doing, or leaves or other loamy bits on the forest floor, because Pepper makes them sneeze. I'm not sure that's why they're hiding. But that's it might. Pepper makes me sneeze. So they like to hide, but when it comes time for these guys to lay eggs and spawn and have young, they all move out of the forest towards ponds. So sometimes around here we see pretty big migrations of spotted salamanders from their usual hiding spots towards ponds. And there are some people who go out at those times to help the salamanders cross any roads that they encounter safely. So they hold up signs to let traffic know to be careful because there are spotted salamanders crossing. We have a hole on our golf course that's all about trying not to hit those spotted salamanders as they go around doing their work of reproduction. So here we go. We're gonna feed this guy a worm, hopefully. There it goes. And pulled it right back under the log. So we'll find another one to feed.
Emily, while you're feeding, Vivian asked me a really good question I thought the rest of the group might want to know the answer to. She wanted to know where we get our animals from at the Science Center.
That's a really good question. So all the animals you're meeting today are protected animals by New York State. So we have some really special permits to have these here. Some of them we're able to collect from ponds in the area, like these spotted salamanders. We got our brook trout and brown trout from some fish nurseries in the area. Most of our animals, though, particularly our reptiles and a lot of our dart frogs and other types of frogs, we're really careful to buy from breeders. So we want to make sure that we're getting animals that have been responsibly raised in human care and not taken out of their homes in the wild. So that's a good question. Thanks for sharing that, Vivian. All right, these guys love feeding time. I'll show you one last exhibit while we're in here.
While
It's our stream exhibit.
you're scooting, Emily, we have a couple more questions. Arlo, your hand is up.
I'm gonna get some more worms.
Why do they always why do they always kind of like, why do they always hide under leaves?
That's a good question. Can you think of a reason a big juicy salamander might want to hide? So I suspect, Arlo, that they are trying their very best to stay invisible to anything that might want to eat them. So they're really good at weeding under logs for an insect to pass by and grabbing that insect and then bringing it back under the log so that something else doesn't come along and make them a meal.
Jacob and Jerome, I saw your hand was up a little bit ago. Do you still have a question or a comment? Yep, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Excuse me?
Yeah. What's up?
You said that you released the smaller trouts into the creek.
Yeah.
So where do you release the like the larger trout?
That's a good question. So the larger trout are actually going to stay here at the Science Center and be one of our more permanent exhibits. We're not going to release those.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll be able to come visit them when we reopen.
And
Cool.
Kavan has asked a couple times what if the salamanders are rare to find.
Oh, good question. So like I said, you probably won't find them if you're just out walking around unless you're poking under logs and things, which is a cool thing to do, but you need to do it very, very carefully so that you don't disturb or harm anything too much. So you might find them, they're kind of spread out and really good at hiding out in the woods. But when they start to do that migration towards ponds and other water to spawn, then you're more likely to see them out and about. And it depends where you live, and if you're near a pond or something, you might see them at certain times of the year.
And Jacob and Jerome, your hand is up again. Do you have a question now?
Does anything eat poison or poison whatever the frogs, those frogs? Those
Dart
salmon?
frogs. So
Yeah.
I think there are some things that can handle the toxins. Our dart frogs in captivity don't actually
Yeah.
have those toxins. In the wild, dart frogs get their poison from what they eat. I'm showing you a view now of some of our frogs here. These are not dart frogs. This is a bullfrog that you would find around here. And we also have a green frog and 2 turtles in this exhibit. I'm going to give them some worms as well. Hoping this bullfrog doesn't jump at me.
Vivian, do
Can
you
I go get some worms?
eat these bullfrogs? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Vivian.
What do you do when the animals die?
Oh, that's a good question. So you're absolutely right. Death is part of life, and so sometimes animals in our collection die here at the Science Center. But we usually take really good care of them, and they tend to live a bit longer in captivity than they would out in the wild. So when they do die, sometimes we want some more information about what happened to them, and then we might get somebody to do a necropsy and try to figure out if they were sick or just died from being old, or if there was something else that happened. These guys aren't really, there we go. We got a frog to eat. And then give a turtle a worm. Woo! Did you guys see that? Here we go. Let's see if we can get the frog to jump on the wall. Nope. So our turtle eating a worm, that's a musk turtle. They're related to snapping turtles, but much smaller. We also have a painted turtle in here, but she's not out right now. And there's that big old bullfrog. The bullfrog can be a little bit intimidating, I find. This is our green frog, much smaller. He tends to stay around the edges because that bullfrog is nervous. But this is a nice stream environment here at the Science Center. It's pretty peaceful too. I think in honor of Earth Day, I might put our Science Center live stream onto this exhibit. So if you guys want to visit with any of the native species in our stream exhibit here, you can go onto the Science Center YouTube page and click onto our live stream later today. Does anyone have any final questions before we log off here? All right. Thank you all so much for coming. Oh, Io's saying goodbye. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Yep, tomorrow we'll have another activity at 10:30, and it'll actually be Emily and I again. We're going to be running an activity called Watch and Create, called Creativity for Sustainability. So we'll do an activity, and for that, you'll just need some paper and some markers and some pencils, maybe something to draw with. But we hope to see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.